I overshot it a little bit. Look how small these are. Hello and welcome to Yarn to Table. My name is Celeste and this is a show about my knitting life. Welcome back. It's been a little while since my last episode, which was my podiversary and year in review live stream. Thank you once again to all of those of you who joined me live and everyone who watched the live stream after it was posted. It was a huge, wonderful celebratory event for me. It was something that made me a little bit nervous. I've never really done anything like that before. And all of your support and just your incredibly warm wishes and your love of talking about these things with me online, talking about knitting and crafting, it just made me feel really, really good. It was just such a wonderful way to celebrate everything that I've made on this podcast and all of the wonderful friendships and just the general knitting community that's out there that I feel so incredibly lucky to be a part of. So thank you so much once again. If you have not watched my show ever before, welcome to your first episode. You can find all of my previous episodes on my channel. There's a playlist to watch from the beginning if you would like to catch up. This is episode 40. There is a, did I say channel? I meant playlist. Anyway, there's a playlist of the most recent ones. There are playlists of all of the vlogs. Lots of fun stuff for you there, or you can just start now and go forward. You should know that we have a Ravelry group, which you can find linked in the doobly-doo or by searching for Yarn to Table on Ravelry, and that has show notes for every episode, information on knit-alongs and giveaways, etc. You can find me on Ravelry and Instagram as Celeste Foal. That's also linked in the doobly-doo. Instagram is a great way to see little behind the scenes peeks at my knitting and other things that are going on in my life. And on my Ravelry account, I have up-to-date project pages with all of the information, all the answers to any questions you're going to have about the projects you see here. So I've kind of gotten away from talking about all the details of every project, colorways, and all that kind of stuff each and every time, because usually there's something more interesting to talk about, but you can still find that information in the show notes as well as on the project pages on my Ravelry page. All of the, yeah, you know what they are. So if you do have a question, however, and you can't find it in either of those places, definitely feel free to ask me, and I will let you know. So we do have a KAL, a knit-along, going on right now. It's a year-long KAL called the Fiber Quest KAL, and if you'd like to know more about it, there is a link in the doobly-doo to a playlist that so far has 2 videos on it. One is overall about the KAL, and the second one is about the first land of fibers, which is the land of camelids, and that's what we're doing right now. That is running through February 28th, so you have until then to post your FO in the FO thread on the Ravelry group, and that's going to be anything that you make with camelid fiber, so probably alpaca, llama, or camel, unless you are, you know, one of those, have access to one of the other rare camelid fibers, which are increasingly rare and often illegal. So if you are curious to learn more about camelid fibers, definitely check out the video that I made all about that. It'll help you pick out what kind of project is going to work best for your fiber, and all of that, as I said, is in the doobly-doo. So I also want to thank everyone for their incredible enthusiasm about that KAL and about that camelid video that I filmed. It really meant a lot to me that you guys found that video to be valuable. I did put a fair amount of time into researching it and making it as full of information as I could, and I am fingers crossed going to manage to do 5 more of those for all of the other lands of fibers as they come up throughout the year. So I was really glad to know that you guys found that to be valuable, and I'm really glad that everyone is as excited about this KAL as I am. So with all of that out of the way, let's jump in and start talking about finished objects. Since I haven't seen you in maybe 3 weeks, I do have a few different finished objects to share. So first of all, I finished 2 pairs of vanilla socks, and I just put one of each on a sock blocker because I only have one set of sock blockers. So here are the other ones, but I'm just going to show you what's on the sock blockers. So these I made for my husband Ryan, and these were for myself. These you will have seen before, and they are out of my own hand-dyed yarn on a 75-25 base in a colorway that I call Battle of Blackwater Bay. This is actually the first hand-dyed I ever did, and I am honestly floored by how beautiful it came out. I think it's really, really lovely. And let's see, oh, and I didn't think it was going to qualify for Anna's hand-dyed KAL that she's running on the Dunkelgrün podcast, but she extended the deadline, so that's really cool. And if you do hand-dye yarn, make sure you check out the Dunkelgrün podcast because there is a KAL running, I think it's through March now, for knitting anything with your own hand-dyed. And of course, it just has an incredible chatter thread full of people talking about dyeing and knitting with their own hand-dyed yarn. You do not have to be a professional dyer. I'm not a professional dyer. It's just anyone who is, you know, from your very first experiments with hand dyeing all the way through people that are running their own dyeing companies. It's just a celebration of hand dyed, of your own personal hand dyed, and it's really, really cool. Also, if you're interested in natural dyeing, Anna is a great resource for that. And if you're not watching her podcast already, I really recommend it. She's incredible. So anyway, I love to knit on vanilla socks when I'm traveling, and I love to knit on them when I go to my residency for my MFA program because they are very mindless and also very small and portable and unobtrusive. So it's really easy to knit on them during seminars and readings and waiting for things to start. Love them. So I took these, which I had already started, and then I ended up knitting almost all of this pair while I was there as well. I actually finished them up in this last week since I've been home. So these are for Ryan. As I said, he is the most knit-worthy person, and he's going to be really excited that he gets to put these on now that I've shown them on the podcast. I did tell him he could go ahead and just put them on, and I would share a photo on the podcast, but he was like, no, I want you to share them. So he's the best. For his socks, I discovered the first time that I made socks for him, I did a 60 stitch count, and I do a 56 for myself. And those fit fine, but then later when I accidentally knit a foot for my own socks too long, but 10 rows, I had him try them on and they also fit him perfectly. So those are his now, and I'm now doing a 56 stitch count for him as well. So I do the same circumference for myself and for my husband. He has, you know, man-sized feet, but he doesn't have particularly like wide feet or ankles or heels or calves or anything like that. So they're, you know, a good deal longer than my feet, but they're not necessarily like huge. So having the same circumference works well. Fish Lips Kiss heel fits him well. And then I do a 75 row foot for him and a 65 row foot for myself. So it's really nice to figure that out because it also means now that if I start a sock and maybe I think it's for me, but it turns out that he likes the yarn, during the foot I can just decide that it's going to be for him, which is pretty cool. So anyway, these are gorgeous. I'm excited for him to have them. And after that, I started on my next vanilla socks, which I cast on while I was in Cambridge. And these are for myself, and this is out of cat sandwich fibers in the colorway Volcanic Mauve, and she is one of my very favorite dyers. She usually has kind of a micro stripe thing going on with her dye, which I think is so beautiful. Here it almost appears more tonal because the two main background colors, which you can see more clearly here, because on the Fish Lips Kiss heel, of course, it becomes thicker stripes. Because those colors are so similar, it almost has more of a tonal effect. So it's sort of in between like a micro stripe and a tonal. And then she has really, really good speckles. She always has beautiful speckles. Most of her colorways are some combination of microstripe and speckles, which I love. And she just does all kinds of different combinations. So I love pink, which you will know if you've watched before. So I scooped up this yarn at one of her recent updates, and I was really happy to have it. This is only the second skein of her yarn that I've had. They've both gone into socks. I just think her yarn looks really gorgeous for socks because it's super fun, and as I said, it gets that really great micro stripe thing going on when you knit it with a small circumference like a sock. So for these, because I had just knit Ryan's socks, I kind of kept going on the leg, and I did 75 rows before the heel instead of 65. So normally I will do my foot and my leg the same length. It doesn't really matter, but that's just sort of what I've been doing. But because I had just done 75 rows for Ryan, I just kept going and I did 75 row legs. So I have a 75 row leg and a 65 row foot. So these are a little bit taller than some of the other socks I've been making for myself lately. I have been continuing on my kick of the 1x1 twisted rib for 20 rounds, which I think helps the socks stay up a little bit better than if you do it for fewer rounds. So I've been liking that. I've been continuing on with the German twisted cast on, or twisted German cast on. I never know which way you're supposed to say it. I just think it has a nice, neat top. It looks a little bit neater than a long tail cast on, so I've been enjoying that. And the other thing I did different on these socks is I again did the very pointy Fish Lips Kiss heel. So I actually went all the way down to just 4 stitches in the center. And I had done that on my Advent socks, and I liked the way that they fit. So I'm not, 100% certain that it's my favorite way to do it, but I did it again on these, and I'm gonna kind of, over the course of wearing other socks I've knit and wearing these with the pointier heels, I think I'll get a better sense of whether that's really gonna be my go-to from now on. So yeah, so I did that. I will say for me, I don't love how a micro stripe sort of turns into a thicker stripe on the heel, on the Fish Lips Kiss heel. It's not terrible, but I would prefer if it didn't. And at some point, I'm going to teach myself afterthought heels. And I think because an afterthought heel, you go round and round, I think it might be better for a microstripe to maintain that microstripe integrity. So I might do that in the future on microstripe yarn, when I feel like it. I want to learn the afterthought heel for self-striping, because again, doing the bullseye, it looks really good with self-striping to do an afterthought. And I think that's going to be a good solution for the micro stripes as well. Although, of course, I love, love, love the simplicity of a Fish Lips Kiss heel. I know a lot of people who really love an afterthought, and I'm curious to see how I like it. So that's what's up in Sockland. And then, in addition to those, so today is Sunday, and yesterday we did the Women's March here in Cincinnati, which again were being held at least all over the country and probably in other places internationally as well, as they were last year. I mean, obviously it wasn't as huge of an event, but it was a really big turnout here. And so the night before, I knit Ryan and I some hats. So that's mine. Here's his. It's pretty much exactly the same. And I did these out of Twinkle's Hand Knit Soft Chunky, which is a discontinued super bulky yarn, 1-ply that is extremely soft. And I had a skein of it because I sort of panic bought it because it had been discontinued, and I really liked it. So anyway, finally found something to do with that, used up all of it, which was great. But I had not made hats for the Women's March last year. And, there were just so many complex feelings going on right around that time. And it was a really hard time. And I think as people were sort of knitting the hats and getting excited about it, I wasn't really ready yet to kind of express myself in any sort of lighthearted, like tongue-in-cheek way. I was really, really, really horrified by everything about what was happening. But for one thing that hit particularly close to home for me was the idea that this man who had admitted on video to sexually assaulting women was going to be sitting in the White House. And I just wasn't ready, after hearing him say that word in the way that he said it, and I'm not going to say the word out loud just because I know so many people watch with their kids, and I don't want you know, them to hear things that they might have questions about. But you know, the word that these hats are named after, after hearing him use it the way that he did, I don't think I was ready to reclaim it. I think it still upset me a lot, and I wasn't ready for like the, you know, this word grabs back kind of like signs, and the just sort of like woo woo sort of like excitement of it. That just wasn't where I was emotionally, which doesn't mean that I had any judgment toward people who were expressing themselves that way, because we all process things in our own ways on our own timelines. And the fact of the matter was that once I did go to the Women's March, it didn't feel so much like a frivolous kind of fun thing. It felt like a sea of pink hats, and you saw all of those photos of just streets all over the world just full of these pink hats. And at that point, it did feel powerful and appropriate to what I was feeling. So I had not knit myself a hat, and I did not wear one last year, which was really funny because, you know, I love pink, I love cats, I love knitting, and I was going to the Women's March. But just the timing of where I was with my feelings about it, it just, that didn't line up. However, after the event, I started to see these hats in a very different way, and I saw them as being more of a symbol of power, and not just sort of like a funny thing, like a funny joke. And so I was like, I kind of want to make one, but then, you know, that was kind of silly because I was like, what am I going to wear it for? I found out we were doing the Women's March again this year, just a few days before we did it. And I've had a really, really long and intense work week because I just got back from Cambridge. So I really wanted to make hats, at least one hat for myself, but I really wanted to make them for both of us because Ryan said he wanted one too. And I really didn't have time to do it until Friday when I got home from work. And in fact, I didn't even come straight home from work. I had to go to a happy hour for somebody whose last day it was. So I got home at like 7 or 8, exhausted after the week, and went, oh my God, I have to make 2 hats. Excuse me. So then I was looking in my stash, and I'd forgotten that I had this. And when I saw it, I was like, this is so great, because like, it's bulky. And so I knit these up so quickly. I wasn't up late. I wasn't stressed out about it. I didn't like destroy my hands. And I think they turned out really cute, and it was just perfect. So I kind of did want to use leftovers from my sock, you know, probably held with a chunkier yarn. Ideally, I really liked the idea of these speckles and everything, and I do think that would make a cute one. But I was on a deadline, so this just worked out absolutely perfectly, and I was so happy with it. So these hats, a lot of the ones that you'll see, so this is clearly like a rectangle, and it's wider than it is tall, right? And a lot of the ones that you'll see will be more of a square, or they'll just be taller in general. But I think that this actually creates the shape of the cat ears a lot better. And a lot of the ones that I see that are taller, they have too much of like this at the top. And what I really think is ideal is for the top to be dead at the top of your head and the excess to just be at the sides, so that it creates these cute little corners which look like cat ears. So even though this looks like a very strange shaped hat when you see it flat, it actually wears really well. And I just figured out how to do that and how to do these in general by just knitting. So I cast them on at the bottom. I did like 3 rounds of 1x1 rib, and then I just knit and stockinette in the round. I Kitchenered the top, and essentially what I did was I just knit until I would put it on my head with the needles in, and I just knit until I could tell that where they touched in the middle was going to be exactly at the top of my head, and it wasn't going to have any excess. And as I felt it, I could tell that there was going to be excess on the sides. So just doing that, I felt pretty confident that it was going to have the right shape, and it did work out well. The second one that I made was a tiny bit shorter than the first one. You can't even really tell now, but it was a tiny bit shorter just because I ran out of yarn, but it still fit perfectly well. And I wore that one because Ryan's head is a little bit bigger than mine, and he wore the other one, and I think they're great, and they're a great little keepsake now. So, and they'll be coming out next year if we have to do this again. They will be coming out as long as we have to do this until he resigns. So anyway, so yesterday after the march, I came home, and I had finished essentially my last volcano sock, but I needed to Kitchener the toe. So I during the rally, you know, before the march, while we were standing around, I was kind of knitting, and that was when I finished this. And so I came home, I Kitchenered the toe. I was sitting in front of some podcasts and just having a lazy afternoon, and I was going to start knitting on something else, but I was watching the Fawn Knits, who had not recorded in about 4 months, and she was back. And I guess I didn't see it on Instagram or something, I didn't realize, but she's pregnant. So she had knit this pair of baby socks, and I love baby socks. And I'm just seeing these baby socks. I have this yarn right in front of me, just sitting there with my needles that I used to knit the sock, and I just was like, I just immediately started casting on a pair of baby socks because it just looked fun, and it was small and mindless, and that was what I felt like knitting in that moment. And so I have them here. So just to clarify, in case this is confusing for you guys, I'm not pregnant, but these are going to be for my baby eventually. So I don't know how much knitting ahead you guys ever do, or if you know anyone who does that, but I am planning on trying to have a baby once I graduate from my master's program, which is next year. And obviously I want to knit a ton of stuff for my baby, but you can't really knit garments ahead very well because you don't know what age the baby is going to be at what time of year until you have a due date. So in order to kind of free up pregnancy time for garment knitting, also keeping in mind I might want to be knitting other things, also keeping in mind I might be super sick and like lose my knitting mojo, as I know happens to a lot of people, I don't want there to be a ton of pressure that everything I knit for the baby has to be knit in that like 9-month period. So instead, I kind of want to knit things like hats and socks and blankets in advance, so that stuff's sort of taken care of. So I have knit a few socks in the past, which I'll show you in a minute actually, because I knit them before I started the podcast. And I just knit these little baby socks, and yeah, so that's the idea there. I made up the pattern. I basically just cast on what seemed about right. The thing is, you kind of need baby socks in different sizes because they grow really fast. So for me, there's no sense in like trying to hit an exact size. It's more like just knit some in a few different sizes and hope for the best. So these I think are maybe going to be good for like a 3-month-old-ish. I mean, it very much depends on the size of the baby and whatever. So, you know, but I basically just cast on what felt about right for a baby of some size at some point. And that was 32 stitches. I did a 2x2 rib because it's stretchier than a 1x1. And the stretchier you can make something, the better it is for fitting someone when you don't know an exact size. So like rib socks are really good as gift knits if you can't measure someone's foot. And again, with the idea that I'd like them to fit the baby for as long as possible when it's growing, ribbed felt like a good idea. Also, it'll help them stay on, and baby socks are not always want to stay on. So I did a 2x2 rib. I kept the top ribbed, but I did stockinette on the bottom, fish lips kiss heel, regular little Kitchener toe, and you know, I just kind of knit until it felt right. It ended up being a 20 round leg and then 15 rounds before the decrease for the toes. So I knit these up, and I was asking Ryan, you know, about what size baby he thought they would fit, because I initially was thinking I wanted them to be newborn size, because the socks that I've knit in the past have been larger, and I'd like to have at least a pair that would fit the baby immediately, because you know, you're going to be excited to like take pictures and stuff like that. So I only see a newborn baby like once every 5 years, but Ryan sees them all the time, and in fact he heel sticks newborns to get their blood, so he is intimately familiar with the size of a newborn foot, which is very convenient for me. So he said these seemed a little bit big for a newborn. So then I cast on another pair. And I overshot it a little bit. Look how small these are. I overshot it a little bit. These I did 20 rounds. Another fish lips kiss heel. 20 stitches a round. I did a 15 round leg, and then I only did 8 rounds before I started decreasing for the toe. And you know, it stretches a little bit because it's ribbed, but they're still insanely small. These are more of like a preemie size. So I'm either gonna give these to someone if I know anyone who has a preemie, or they can be, you know, my kind of just in case socks in the stash. Some people, when knitting ahead for babies, recommend that you do a just in case preemie hat, just because they're so small and easy to whip up, and if you do end up having your baby premature, all of the other hats that you have are going to be way too big, you know, and hats are really important. Hand knit socks are not like mandatory, but you know, I might as well hold on to them just in case, and then, you know, hopefully my baby is born at term and they can go to someone else if I know someone else who has a preemie, or, you know, hang them on the Christmas tree or something. I don't know, they're ridiculous. So you can see the difference here. They're like half the size. I kind of overshot it a little, right? So I'm gonna try for an in-between, and maybe I'll get closer to a newborn size. But yeah, had some fun making those. I mean, I just gush over them because they're so incredibly cute. I think baby socks are just one of the cutest freaking things. So I really, really love these. So I'll show you the other baby socks that I've made in the past. And I don't think I've ever shown these on the podcast because I did knit them before I started the podcast. So these are the first pair that I did, and they have this cute little eyelet pattern on them. I have a project page for these if you want to know. I did use a pattern for these if you want to find it, but they're just out of some Knit Pick Stroll, and they're fairly large. I mean, that's like maybe more like 6 months. I don't know. It depends on the kid, I guess. And then I made these adorable ones, which this is actually the first time I ever did stranded knitting, I believe, for these cute little hearts. And these are really, really soft because they're made out of Rowan's Finest. They're also not super wash, but they're lovely. And then I made some little baby booties that look like moccasins, which are very, very cute. And all of these are on my project page as well if you want to know what the patterns are for them. Yeah, so add these to the Knit Ahead stash, and I've got a nice little nest piled away for when the day comes. And I'm sorry if it seems completely insane to you to be knitting those like a year and a half before even trying to get pregnant, but if you know me, you know that I like to plan ahead. It's just how I am. So knitting baby socks is freaking fun. Why not do it now when, you know, the time comes? I may be too nauseated to do it. Okay, so that is everything with everything FOs. So let's move into whips. So let's see. I have my sweater, which I have not knit on since I haven't knit on since I got back from residency. I'm not sure if I've added to it since I showed you on my live stream, but this is the Ebba by Diana Walla. It's gotten to the color work portion. This is a bottom-up pullover. And I've stalled a little bit just because the color work takes a little bit of concentration for me. It's not the most natural thing in the world for me. And sometimes I'm really in the mood to do it, and sometimes I'm really not. I was enjoying it a lot over the Christmas holidays, but I didn't take it to Cambridge with me, obviously, and then since I've been back from Cambridge, I have not wanted to work on anything that wasn't mindless. I have just been so wiped out. So I'm definitely going to be picking this up again when I feel a resurge of energy. I want to get it off the needles for sure, but it just was not in the cards to be working on this week. So that's kind of your update on that. Not a ton to say about it that I haven't said already. And the other big project, which I have knit a little bit on since I got back, but I think just one time, is my Lauralee. This is my project for the Land of Camelids. It is a lovely alpaca cashmere silk blend from La Bien-Aimée. And it's this triangular shawl that starts with garter, goes into mosaic color work, which I'm on right now, and then ends with some lace in the contrast color, the yellow. So here's the mosaic color work. It does not show up as stark with these two colors as it does with some of the more contrasting colors that other people choose. And I knew that going in, obviously. And I do love the look of the contrast. I think that's probably the best, choice if you're picking the pattern first and then the yarn. I think I would go for a bigger contrast, but in this situation I had the yarn and I was looking for a pattern, and I really, really wanted to make this pattern because it just looked fun. So I don't think it's like the absolute best pattern yarn match. I think it's like 80% there, and I'm willing to live with that. So the mosaic color work, maybe not as clear as it would be with something else, but I don't think it's bad. I'm starting to get into a rhythm with the mosaic color work. I don't find it to be as fun as brioche or like some other type double knitting type things, just personally. It's a whole like slip stitch thing, and the pattern is just, I'm starting to get into that rhythm where it's easier to kind of know what I'm doing as I'm doing it, but it's not ever going to be like memorizable. And it's It's fine, it's just not the most addictive thing ever, and I was kind of hoping that it might be a little bit more popcorny. So, you know, you live and you learn. I wanted to try a new technique, and I'm trying it, and I'm discovering that it's maybe not my favorite, and that's fine. I am very excited about the finished object. I absolutely adore working with the yarn. It is absolute heaven. So that's where I am with that. I'm maybe about a third of the way through the mosaic color work, and then I'll be on to the lace and hopefully get that puppy finished up. And then my final whip is that I have been back on the hexapuff train recently. So as I said, I have been just absolutely mentally and physically exhausted this week, and I didn't want to put a lot of time on my two more complicated projects. I didn't really want to cast on something new and mindless because I don't like to get my whips to be too many, and I want to keep focus on those. But it was sort of like I wanted things that were small and manageable and simple, and you know, the women's March hats helped for that. The you know, obviously finishing up these socks helped for that. Doing the little baby socks was part of that. And another thing that I found that myself wanting to work on was hex puffs. So if you don't know, hexapuffs are these adorable little hexagonal puffs. They are stuffed with wool or polyfill. I use polyfill and a little bit of dried lavender. So they're lovely. You can just have them as like sachets, but they are part of a pattern by Tiny Elements called the Beekeeper's Quilt. And the concept is that you make a whole bunch of them and you attach them together by sort of like quilting their corners together, right? And it turns into this huge quilt that is squishy and lovely. So I'm gonna need a ton of these before they become a quilt, and I kind of just do them here and there. But they are really fun. You knit them like a toe-up sock. So you sort of do like I do a Judy's Magic cast on. The one in the pattern is different. In the pattern, she does a 3-needle bind off and a different cast on that leave ridges. But I prefer them to be completely clean and not have any ridges. So I do Judy's Magic, which was created for toe-up socks. And then you knit them in the round, and then you get to the top, and I do a Kitchener finish. And they are just a lot of fun. So here are all the ones that I made this week. Is that? No, I made that one earlier. All of these. So this one is some Knit Picks alpaca. The exact yarn and colorways are all in my show notes. I did a few different ones from this Bergère de France Gumi, which is a self-patterning that I used to make some socks out of a while ago, and it's really fun because they're all kind of a bit different. Like this one doesn't even have any of the red or the brown, right? So that's kind of cool to see how a patterning yarn works up on these. It still has about the same round and round, you know, length of like the toe of a sock. So you can get the patterning happening, whereas if you used this yarn on like something larger, like a hat or something, you would kind of miss out on some of that. And then, let's see, I did some Madeline Tosh, which is really pretty. These are all just leftover yarn from other projects. Some tonal knit picks and some, this is Felici. So Felici works really well for these because if you start at the beginning of a stripe, it basically takes 2 stripes and gives you a nice line down the middle. At least it has on the 2 hexapuffs that I've made out of the Felici. This has happened both times, and I think it's really cute. So that's fun. This is from Chickadee, Felici and Chickadee. So anyway, let's see, there was something else I wanted to say about this. Yeah, so I choose my colors for this. I want them all to be relatively like neutral-ish with some pinks and other pastels like this lavender a little bit. But generally I kind of stick to one palette so that when the blanket comes together, it will have a bit of a cohesiveness in terms of the color, and it's also a palette that I generally am just drawn toward. So I don't put all of my scraps into that, but if I have scraps that fit that those parameters, they will often end up making at least a few hexapuffs. I have a bag full of yarn for hexapuffs that I keep with my other project bags, and then I'll put yarn into it that I think might go well with the hexapuffs, which is what I've actually done with the leftovers from this, because I think that would make cute hexapuffs as well. So that brings me to On the Horizon, and the only thing coming up that I haven't talked about yet is I need another pair of vanilla socks on the needles for my travel knitting since I finished my volcano socks. So I have been thinking about what I want to cast on with, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think I've narrowed it down to two. So I'm either going to use this Nora George yarn, which was a 1-month Great Characters in Literature Club that she did, and this is Elizabeth Bennet from Pride and Prejudice. And it's just a 75/25. I love these speckles, so pretty. So I'm either going to do Elizabeth Bennet socks, or I'm going to do some Felici socks. And this is Time Traveler, which is inspired by Doctor Who. I've only watched half an episode of Doctor Who. I'm sorry. I want to get into it. There's too many shows, and there's just not enough time, and there's too many books and podcasts, and you know. So I would like to get into Doctor Who at some point. Maybe knitting these socks will get me going on it. I'll want to start working on the socks and watching Doctor Who at the same time. I don't know. But even if I never get into Doctor Who, I am into this color palette. So I'm trying to not feel like too much of a nerd poser by making some Doctor Who socks. Anyway, I have two of these skeins because they're only 50-gram skeins. And, you know, with contrasting heels or just making them a little short, I mean, I can eke out a pair of socks for myself with 50, but I grabbed two because this was at a period in time where I was trying to figure out if I needed one or two to make socks out of Felici, because I think I got burned at some point where I tried to make them out of one and then I needed more or something. I don't remember exactly, but I guess I always have 100 grams when I make a pair of socks, and yet something about having two separate 50-gram balls makes me feel like if I leave about 50 grams on the table, it feels like more of a waste, because when you use half of a 100-gram skein like this, it just feels like leftovers, like you have part of a skein left. But if I had an entire ball that was packaged as its own ball, it would feel like I hadn't bought the right amount or whatever. So I guess where I'm going with this is it made me think that I wanted to make knee socks. If you watch Squirrel Pie Productions with Tommy, you will know that she has recently become obsessed with making knee socks. I used to wear all knee socks all the time. When I was in college, knee socks were just the length of sock that I bought. And there's something that feels particularly fun about like quirky stripes as a knee sock. So I want to make knee socks out of these. So the thing with that is it's a slightly less mindless than just my regular vanilla sock, because I do have to guess how many I should cast on and then sort of measure it around my calf and figure out if it's the right amount, figure out where I want my decreases to be. It's not that complicated, but it is a little bit more complicated than my usual just cast on a sock. It's the easiest thing in the world thing for my sort of on-the-go knitting. So I can imagine if I tried to make these my on-the-go knitting, I would find myself stuck somewhere wanting my knitting and not being able to knit because I needed to like measure it on my calf or something and I was in a restaurant or whatever. So that's the thing that makes me hesitate a little bit. I know I should just sort of push through that and make it happen, but I don't know. I hesitate a little bit. And then this has been sitting in my stash for about a year, and I know it will make gorgeous socks that I will absolutely enjoy making. And the only thing that makes me hesitate about this is just how beautiful it looks in the skein, which is so stupid, but like, look at that. It's just so beautiful. I don't want to cake it up. It's too pretty. Just so stupid. So I don't know. It's probably going to be one of those. I don't have a ton of yarn in my stash, so I don't have a lot of options in terms of what my next pair is going to be, but it will be happening. So that's all I got for On the Horizon. I don't have any stash enhancement for you, so the next thing to talk about would just be chit chat, and I can't even knit while I chit chat because, as I said, I don't have a sock going, so I don't even know what to do with myself. But I'm just gonna have to sit here and talk to you without knitting. Just gonna have to drink my tea. So let's see. I don't want to go on and on because I feel like I've talked a lot about my projects, but I'll just update you on where I'm at. So if you don't know, I am getting my Master's in Fine Arts, my MFA in Creative Writing, and the way that my low residency program works is that most of the semester because it's creative writing, so much of it is just working in solitude. So I am mostly just working on my own manuscripts and also doing reading and writing critical analysis of that reading, and all of that is sort of in correspondence with a mentor. I have a different mentor every semester. And then, sorry for scratching my nose, I know it's kind of rude. Anyway, then every 6 months I go to Cambridge, Massachusetts for my, to Lesley University for a residency, and that is where all of the workshopping of manuscripts, all of the seminars, and all of that kind of stuff gets crammed into an extremely intense week and a half. So I just got back last weekend from my winter residency, which was incredible, and I was there in very cold temperatures. It was actually very cold here at the same time. So I was like walking around with my hood up and just like negative Fahrenheit wind chills, and on some days negative Fahrenheit even without the wind chill. There's tons of snow and it was lovely. I love the winter time, and I love Cambridge, Massachusetts, and there was, it was a lot of work. It was incredibly inspiring, and by the end of it, you start to kind of burn out because your brain can't really store anything else. And then I came back, and I have been just like going at work because Monday was a holiday, Martin Luther King Day. Tuesday we had an all-day meeting for my office about like various initiatives for the year. So we essentially had a 3-day work week, and I feel like I crammed about 5 days of work into it. I went out every night after work, which is way too much, but it just various things. Somebody's last day, I had to go to the happy hour. I have been trying to see all these movies for the Oscars, which I'm going to talk about in a second. And on Wednesday, Brian and I went to trivia, because we hadn't been able to spend a lot of time together because I'd been out of town, and he works in the evenings. So when he does have a day off and we can spend time together, we want to do that, and he loves going to trivia. So basically, I'm so tired. And I just want to do nothing this weekend except that I have lots of stuff that I need to do for school, and I had the Women's March and I wanted to record the podcast, and it was just blah, 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 blah. So I'm starting to run a little bit ragged. I'm needing to, take a step back, and at the same time, I need to plow forward because I have a lot of work that I need to do for school, and for work. So trying to find that balance again. My word for the year is cherish. And that's because I really want to remember to cherish this time rather than just trying to put my head down and get through what is an extremely busy and just demanding period in my life of going to school full-time and working full-time and doing creative projects on the side. I want to remember to cherish it because this might be my last time in life that I'm a student. And it might be the last few years in my life before I'm a parent, and I don't want to miss out on appreciating it for what it is and really being in the moment, because that's really hard for me, not thinking 5 steps ahead, but just really appreciating the moment. So I'm trying to find that balance, and I'm trying to, think of everything as a gift and try to appreciate where I am in every moment. So that's sort of my challenge for the year, broadly speaking. As I said, I saw a couple movies this week. So if you don't know, I initially wanted to be an actor. I initially went to school for that for a year. At a conservatory, which is like a very intensive fine arts program, before I decided to be a writer instead. And I am extremely passionate about movies, and I'm very, very, very into the Oscars, which I know is kind of silly, but it's like sports for me. I like learning about everything and sort of what are the odds and predicting and guessing ahead, and looking at the stories of each year. This is the story of Oscar's So White, and here's a sort of underdog winning Best Picture, and here's the sort of guy who's been nominated a million times. Is he finally going to get his Oscar? I love all that stuff. I try to be realistic about how much it actually matters in the grand scheme of things. But I also think that it does matter a little bit more than some people might think it does, because I think honoring, some people don't believe that you should give awards to art at all because it's subjective, and how can you really judge what's the best? And I understand that argument, but I also think it's really, really important to give honors to art, because when a film is nominated for an Oscar, or when a person is nominated for an Oscar, it means more people are going to know about that film, know about that work, that performance, that thing that person is doing. And it brings a lot more attention to the art, and the art is really important. So I think that you can take it too seriously, but I also think that we should recognize that it does have meaning, and there's a reason that a lot of people care about this. And I'm one of those people who cares a lot about this. So it's we're in full swing Oscars prediction time right now. The nominations are going to be announced on Wednesday. The Golden Globes were last week, which I watched while I was in Cambridge on my phone. And the Screen Actors Guild Awards are tonight, which I think I'm also going to be able to watch on my phone. I will have to find out. But so everything's happening. The actual Oscars are going to be in March, and you can see me going to an Oscars party at our local sort of art house cinema in my first, I think it was my first vlog, my winter weekend vlog, which is on the channel if you haven't seen that. You can see my stunned reaction to the La La Land, Moonlight sort of kerfuffle that happened last year. But yeah, so anyway, I always try to make it a point to see all of the best picture nominees at least, and then as much as I can, I try to see all of the nominees in the other major categories. And so this week, yeah, in the last 7 days, as soon as I got back, we saw I, Tonya, which we wanted to see together, and then by myself, I saw The Post and Call Me By Your Name, which I can't even talk about because I loved it so much. It was just stunning, and like, honestly, I saw it a couple of days ago and I'm still just like constantly thinking about it, like trying to process how to even describe what I love about it in words. And I'm listening to the soundtrack. I'm now listening to the audiobook. And it's just absolutely breathtakingly gorgeous. So yeah, so I still have some to see, but so far my favorite films for the year are Call Me By Your Name, I, Tonya, Lady Bird, and Get Out, for sure. And there's a lot of good movies this year, honestly. I mean, I always love Star Wars. I really liked the Star Wars movie this year, and there's still a lot to see. So that's another thing I love about the winter, is it's just prime movie season. So anyway, now I feel like I'm just rambling on, but I'm a little out of practice. It's been a few weeks. So hopefully that wasn't too uninteresting for you. If you're still here, make sure to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. It helps other people find me. Subscribe if you haven't yet. That also helps other people find me, and it helps you know when new episodes come out. Thanks again so much for watching. I believe I will be back in 2 weeks. Is there any reason I shouldn't be? No, that seems right. And until then, happy knitting!